Good morning and welcome to Talking Point here on WESN, the content capital. My name is Keaton Shaw. A brand new day here in the Republic as we continue the conversations of the latest happenings here in Trinidad and Tobago. And many of you would have woken up to the news this morning that flour has increased by 33% with a suggested retail price increase of 28%. You have to bear in mind that's suggested. That's not necessarily going to be the case. Nevertheless, NFM has confirmed that they have secured enough wheat for the remainder of 2022, which is actually miraculous. But nevertheless, there's so much to add to this conversation, and alongside me, of course, this morning is my co-host and colleague, Mr. Sean Michael Small. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Keaton. And yes, economist Dr. Marlene actually said this little government could do to abate the prices rising in the short term, but what about long term? And I do now wonder, because it's been a back and forth situation, right? We need diversification. Then circumstances just happen to unfold that, okay, maybe still giving attention to the energy sector might have paid off. However, now the shoe is on the other foot. Maybe if we started the ball rolling on agriculture, we might have been in a better position, because as much as whatever we might have done for agriculture last year might not have given us significant dividends this year, particularly anything we started now within the last 6 months. However, this is a sign that we don't know when this will end. So as much as we say, price of energy is up and our situation might stabilize, well, we can't make that assumption. The cost of food and food security might be an issue because this situation might continue to deteriorate, or some other factor from some other part of the world might have an effect on the global price of food and global trade. And that might hit us, okay, maybe not within a year, maybe 2 years or 3 years or 4 years down the line. And if we keep saying, well, we can't, in the short term, we can't fix it, we can only think about long term, but we never start these long-term solutions, well, then we more or less spin on top in mud, and we're going to face this problem every time.
Well, 28%, ladies and gentlemen, and there were queues across the country yesterday at various supermarkets and groceries to try and secure flour. Many people complaining on social media that they were restricted in the quantity that they could purchase, and many fear, actually, that supermarkets as well as retailers are going to use old stock at new prices. So that happens from this morning. But as part of our conversation this morning, we're also very pleased to have joining us via Zoom the former Minister of Finance and Attorney at Law, Ms. Karen Nunes, to share. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning, Keaton. Good morning, Sean. And of course, to your viewers, I'm always happy to be with you on Wednesday. This reminds me of when we had exchange control and U.S. currency was not available. And we saw ourselves having to be very judicious in the way the money was spent, our foreign currency. So I hope we're not going back to those days.
Well, the issue with that...
It's not a good place to be, black market, etc., etc.
Yes.
And the issue with that too, Karen, well, I'm glad that you mentioned the black market, because that's of serious concern, because I think we spoke about this on the program, Sean. If it was not last week, it was sometime before, in relation to the fact that now, with the shortage of foreign exchange associated with our economics, the issue now is people could purchase products, but they're going to be paying more for less products than what was available before.
I think it's a case where it doesn't necessarily make sense given, and we've talked about this, given what the Minister of National Security, how he's been messaging. Why did we have a problem with foreign exchange? Well, price of oil was low and we didn't have the balance of trade. Well, now energy prices are high. Why does it seem as though we still have a problem with foreign exchange? Because we haven't really heard, maybe we don't, but we haven't heard of anything officially saying, hey, foreign exchange situation is normalizing and things are getting better. I don't know if maybe no one could get past the fact that the price of food has, I think, flour has gone up, 2 or 3 times now? Just for the year
This
alone?
is the second time in 6 months that flour has gone up, and of course prices across the board will increase. But to your point, bear in mind that even though we've had a surplus due to the prices of oil, the mere fact is we have loans to pay back, and in paying back those loans, we have to pay it back in US currency, which is still going to add to our shortage of foreign exchange. So yes, maybe our economy is doing all well and fine, as the Minister of Finance would have stated in his mid-year budget review. But again, you have to understand the amount of financing that we received over the COVID-19 pandemic. And prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, those loans are to be repaid in US dollars.
One thing though, some of those loans were spent locally, so the foreign currency, for all intents and purposes, is potentially still available because it makes a part of our reserve, which is what partially made the finance minister's statement on how our reserves are so high disingenuous, because that wasn't a sustainable source. So it's not all bad with the loans. I think the actual liquidity might be there to pay back some of it, because we kept it in reserve. The flip side, of course, is it's part of the reserve. So we can't double count these things. We have to realize it's going to be expended somewhere.
Karen, one of the issues with this topic that we're touching on is energy prices throughout the world. Now, last week, Friday, Sean, we were watching the news, and I was on my computer, and Sean suddenly gasped at the fact that the headline stated that Russia has now cut off gas supplies to some European nations. And now, yes.
Well, I think the reports ended up being that they reduced. And it was like a trick in semantics. They said that important parts were under sanctions, so they had to, after conducting maintenance, they had to reduce flow. So like Nord Stream 1 and to other.
Of course. Well, again, political language is a very funny thing. But to add to that now, we also have to look at Germany. And we also have to add Trinidad and Tobago, this small nation, and compared to these much larger European nations, to the picture in order to add context. Karen?
I would just add to that it is curious and worrisome at the same time that with all the so-called increase in our GDP, within 2 short years, there's nothing to put into the Heritage Stabilization Fund, which has to be put in U.S. currency. And that is considered sort of as a debt in a way, because it's taken from the consolidated fund and transferred into the HSF fund. So it's not generating revenue per se. The investment of the HSF does generate revenue in that sense because of investment. But when you look at what's going on in the geopolitical world, and we are near, as I say, price taker, obviously there is a war sort between Russia and China, in particular, with United States, and the United States having to back down to a large extent from its position, because a lot of the EU countries that were very strong at the beginning with the Ukraine position have also had to back down. And I don't want to misrepresent what I believe I heard, so I did not read it, but I did hear it, and I think it was a good source. And now they're even going back to looking at coal as a source of a short term as a source of energy because of what's going on with Russia. Russia supplies about 38% of all of Europe's natural gas, and I know the big player now is LNG, which has to be transported by ship, and a special requirement for its transshipment. And it appears that now that LNG is now the big player in this whole saga.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're seeing an end to this right now. Though Ukraine and Russia is to continue as long as we have the supply chain issues that we are experiencing. And by the way, let me just add, the food prices in terms of inflation is 7.6%, which is pretty high when you take it away from the headline inflation. But the other thing that is very worrying, when we try to compare ourselves with countries like United States, etc., we have to understand that the inflation we are experiencing is not demand pull. Americans' own is because after 2 years of not being able to spend, they're spending like wild, and that is causing housing prices, a lot of prices to go up, including the supply management issues. In Trinidad, we have cost-push inflation, which means the demand is very low, which means that the confidence in the economy is very low. And I think the last report from the central bank indicated that the liquidity, the cash available in the market, had cut by just 3.6% billion as opposed to over 7 billion just a year ago. So we are not in a good position. Let me talk about low inflation in Trinidad. That's good if the economy is doing well, and we're seeing a lot of activity in terms of our export. That is not the case, and our inflation is being driven by low investment, poor consumer confidence, and persons holding on to the little money they have and not willing to invest or to spend.
And speaking about investment, what was reported to be the preferred bidder on the refinery, and note, again, even if you want to make the argument, because I believe, and some of our callers disagree, right, and I get it, I understand their point, but with the price of oil that is now, the cost to operate the refinery, it should still be, I would think, potential. There should still be potential to make a profit, but the preferred bidder, Quantum, that's what was reported to us. Apparently, they also were in the works to deal with 2 other refineries in 2 other countries, one being Aruba, which just cut Quantum out of that process, and now they're looking for other bidders. And we haven't necessarily heard anything with regards to Quantum and the Petrotrin sale moving forward, so it makes me wonder what's going on there. Why we don't have any other company potentially looking to invest, because as Karen I think pointed out last week, America is looking to restart their refineries. Oil refineries are restarting. I mean, the fact that Germany, who wanted to be an energy leader in renewables and who wanted to basically kind of position itself almost like what oil producing nations are now with regards to renewables for the future, they're going back to coal. Politically, this is not something that you would have thought even feasible for a European socialist or left-leaning nation to go back to coal. They were telling Africa, no, you can't go to coal. But now the demands of energy is so high, and the issue is when you are just pumping natural gas like through Nord Stream 1, well, that infrastructure setup, that's relatively cheaper than buying liquefied natural gas from tankers on ships. So the shift is not something that's very easy for Europe right now. It's not even potentially necessarily easy for Russia to shift to get new customers, as I've been saying before. But the pressure of this and the fact that there's a market there and we can't get this refinery situation solved, I don't think that's a good sign.
Can I just make 2 points that I think are important to make? The issue with the LNG is not just the transshipment by way of ships, which is the only way you can transship it. But you have to build special, I don't know what you call port or platforms. And those platforms are not, take time and take a considerable amount of money. So, for example, I believe in the same Aruba example you're using, they were dealing with 2 companies, one of which was supposed to be building a platform to be able to do the transshipment of LNG. So one of the problems with LNG availability is that the platforms necessary to be able to transport it, not just the ships, but the platforms themselves, they are not as many as are required now, and they take time and money. And coming back to the Aruba issue, I think you are, and I'm taking it straight from the Express. And the Minister of Labour, Mr. Cruz, I don't know how to pronounce it, it's a Dutch name, it appears to me. But they have said that the exclusivity contract that they had entered into with Quantum LSC, not to refit the refinery, but actually build the refinery, is no longer in it. It has come to an end. They are not going forward with them. And that should send very strong red signals to our government, who has given us very little information about Quantum. Quantum only could tell you about Aruba and Angola.
Yes.
And only 2 days ago, or 3 days ago, Aruba has cut ties with Quantum.
Karen, I'm not trying to be...
That should be very worrying.
I'm not trying to be facetious in any way at all, but when the story first broke in relation to Quantum being the preferred bidder, and the mere fact that the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries indicated that officials, high-ranking officials within the United States were in contact with him, even from the embassy, were in contact with him, that worried me, that concerned me, that this was more political rather than what would have been the best thing to add to that, again, not being facetious, but Quantum's website, I don't know if anybody was able, there's 2 websites that exist. And
3.
you can check out both.
It's
Well, there's a
3.
3rd one now. And I saw 2, at least 2. And it was, you would never ever think that this looks like somebody's IT project from high school, that sort of website.
It looks like a small business.
Right.
But I want to comment on the point with the United States Embassy, because I went back and read it. And this is where I find that the Minister of Energy handles the truth carelessly, very much in the way that he did with CNN. And why I say that is that he gave the statement that the United States endorsed it. But I think the Express or whatever newspaper it was not taking his word for it. So they wanted to see the exact statement that the U.S. Embassy had issued. The U.S. Embassy never endorsed Quantum LLC.
Mm-hmm.
What the U.S. Embassy did is made a very generic, vanilla statement saying that any business that a UK company is involved in, the United States obviously will give its support. That is like saying anything about anything. So they never endorsed Quantum. And for the Minister of Energy to give the impression, which is the impression he gave, that Quantum was endorsed by the United States was far from, it was misleading is being kind. Misleading is being kind. So between the Aruba issue and when we read what the U.S. Embassy actually said, and never mentioned Quantum by name, unless the newspaper left that out, then we know that Quantum has not been endorsed by the United States.
Just a quick thing. As far as I could tell, Quantum started off as an electricity provider or service provider company, not an oil refinery company. So now they have 3 refineries that they were supposedly looking to purchase, refurbish, rebuild, or what have you. I don't necessarily know where that expertise comes from within Quantum. I don't know if it's a shell game, because the Angola website has has different names to the American owners you see with regards to the original Quantum website.
We don't know anything. We don't even know the headquarters of Quantum. And to add to that, it's 2 brothers really running this big business. And we know nothing about those 2 brothers. So it's something to really focus on.
Keaton, I can tell you this. I went online. And it's almost amusing, You know, I went and looked for the Aruba.
Uh-huh.
So they tell you what you want to know, history of it, they usually give you that. Blank. Media statement, blank. So you know the Aruba thing is a dead horse. I mean, if I have to look at the website for the Aruba Quantum. And another thing too, the reason why, and I think I want to stress this very strongly, the reason why Heritage Patriots apparently were not able to qualify, let's not go into all the details, the reason why, other than it is a matter of the financial viability of any company that wants to rebuild, restructure. And I have seen no financial statement regarding this company. And yet our Minister of Finance, who you must have, I don't know how much confidence you have in what he says, but I have very little, says to you, we did our due diligence. And just as citizens, you look in, where's the due diligence? If you have to look at what's online, you know this is not a company you want to do business with.
You definitely know. I told you, when you see www.quantumllc.tt, the government will code that as them doing their due diligence, and that's what to expect. But in concluding this conversation, ladies and gentlemen, and adding to all this, if you were to wake up in Germany this morning, you'd be paying 23 euros for a gallon of gas. 23 euros for a gallon if you were to wake up in Germany this morning.
Angola's office looks like it's a small mall shop in a strip mall, something like Ellerslie Plaza. That's what Google Maps is telling me. Quantum Consortium Angola LLC.
I don't know what more we can tell you. Minister of Energy and Energy Industry, Stuart Young, if you're listening this morning, you know, there are a couple websites that you should visit. I mean, that's not you doing your due diligence, but that's you just enlightening yourself a bit more in relation to exactly what this company is.
This is what media practitioners will probably look at as with regards to quality as if this was a source, this would not necessarily appear to be a reputable or trustworthy source.
And the question both of you need to ask is why would you want to do business with them?
Yeah. And if that was a
That's
source,
the
by the way,
question.
ladies and
Why
gentlemen,
would you want to do business with them?
if that was a source, just make sure that you actually quote it in any argument you put forward. No plagiarism in any of your arguments at all.
Hey, we'll get to that.
We're
We'll
going
get
to
to
take
that.
a break here now on the program. When we return, you'll understand what I mean very shortly.
Granddad? Huh? What has CNT given to the world?
Well, we invented the beautiful sport of good racing. We showed everyone how to go low with limbo. And we brought steel pan and soca to the world.
Wait, wasn't the Zinger invented in 1984?
Yup, and I couldn't be prouder.
Get the double-breaded, extra juicy, 100% Trini KFC Zinger, only at KFC.
Did you know that 1 in 4 children has an undetected eye problem? Their vision can change dramatically every year, from the blackboard to digital screens. 80% of learning starts with what our eyes perceive. Keep your child's future in focus at Ferreira Optical. Get complete eyewear for kids starting at only $695. Come into Ferreira Optical today. Conditions apply.
Burning questions, urgent topics. Welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
It may seem like the hardest thing to do right now, but we all need each other to wear a mask, wash our hands, watch our physical distance, and stay at home. We need you safe. Together we can make the difference. Together we can curb the spread of COVID-19. So let's be responsible in our actions. The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Brothers and sisters, when I read that, it reminded me of something. And someone has since come forward, because as I said before, people are crawling out of the woodwork now with information. Back in 2014, the UNC raised an issue about the slate being put forward by Keith Rowley, and it was reported on a blog called Jyoti Communications, and it said that, whether or not they was asking whether or not someone on Rowley's team was disqualified from a tertiary level institution for plagiarism. Well, tonight I want to ask the question, Keith Rowley, did you ever investigate that allegation? Have you ever found out who is the person? Is that person now not just on your slate, but are they also sitting in your cabinet? Because I think it is very important for us to know, because you see, when you are, saying that you're interested in the development of the youth, and you want to foster a better sense of a higher level of education amongst youth in Trinidad and Tobago, you want them to aspire to greater things. It is important to know if someone sitting in your cabinet as part of the core structure of the People's National Movement, was prohibited and not allowed to complete a master's degree in government from a tertiary level institution because they were accused of plagiarism. That is academic dishonesty. And I raise these questions tonight, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm telling you that if you cannot trust people to even write a paper or an exam with honesty, how can you trust them with public funds? How can you trust them with the future of this country? So I have received the information. I am making inquiries to verify the authenticity of it, but I am putting it out there tonight, and I am giving Keith Rowley and everybody else in his cabinet and his parliamentary arm to answer the question whether they know if anyone was actually accused of this and prevented from completing their education at a tertiary level institution in Trinidad and Tobago at the postgraduate level, because I think it is important for us to raise that.
Plagiarism, an act of literary theft, an act of fraud. And this is just one aspect that we add to the controversy surrounding Minister of Youth Development and National Service, Foster Cummings.
Well, we don't necessarily add it, but it is heavily implied by, and I will quote again from Opposition Senator Lakshmi Dayal, you want to foster a higher level of education among the youth. So, I mean, it generally is clear who she was implying the situation, and that is that a member of cabinet was prohibited from achieving or gaining a master's degree due to accusations, which I assume were proven or proven well enough to prevent them of plagiarism.
We add it because Foster Cummings has commented on the situation.
Well, yes.
And he has admitted that, yes, indeed, there was a situation involving him in his master's degree. He was studying to get a master's degree in government, in which he indicated that in his paper, he did quote the book. He used quotations from a particular book. In the bibliography, however, quotations in the actual paper, he did not reference. He indicated that the university took it up. It went to a board who deliberated and advised that he drop out of the program and return after 1 year. Now, by the way, dropping out is a very polite way of saying that they basically debarred him from the program, right? Just to let you know, you have to understand. And getting debarred from a university, you don't have a choice but to wait a year. It's not optional. And after that 1 year, he re-entered the program, and then he stated that a university professor kept raising the issue again, and upon raising that issue, he decided not to write any more exams after one semester. The issue with this now is, has Foster Cummings once again fooled us? Because as much as it's a minor thing such as a master's degree, this is the Minister of Youth Development and National Service. What example, in any capacity as a government official, is he setting for the nation? Karen, you're an academic yourself. I think you understand what I'm talking about.
Yes, and I want to be very careful to say that hearing about this issue of plagiarism, I'd heard about it quite a long time ago, and I do believe it had some bearing on decisions that were made in terms of in being part of the, at least when I was part of the government. So it was nothing new to me. I had heard that the university had taken that step. And from a very, as called a reliable source. But I did inquire further. So I want to say first, before I deal with that, I thought Mr. Cummings, as I've said on previous occasion, I really admire the program he's doing with the young people, which we've spoken about already, and helping them to get involved in agro-industry. So this is not an attack on his competency. Mm-hmm. What it is an issue of his honesty. And if we are prepared to say that that is not dishonest enough or not something that disqualifies him from holding a position where trust and confidence are key, but there be it. There goes it. But I know as an academic myself, when I was at university myself, doing my first degree, there was a very, very big issue between two lecturers over that same issue of plagiarism because what a lecturer has, or what a person has in university, is the intellectual property. That's their tool of trade, what belongs to them. And if you want to use it in any writing, you are allowed to use it. I think there's a certain amount, but you must give credit in a footnote.
Yes.
And if you want to go further than that, you have to get the active permission of the person to do so. For him to say he had it in his bibliography means nothing, because where in the bibliography, if at all, he may have looked at it, but to actually, for the universities to have actually taken the step they took, it has to be, in my experience as being an academic, and I would imagine it has to be a very serious issue of not just forgetting to quote where you got the source from, but it has to have been extensive enough. It had to be extensive enough that he was called to withdraw from the program. I don't think he did it on his own. And that when he came back, that again the issue was raised, and then he withdrew again. And I don't think it was a voluntary withdrawal on his part. And therefore, how much he minimizes it, maybe in another world of professionalism, that may not matter much. But in the field of academics, it's a very serious thing. In fact, I'll just say one more thing on that. It is so serious that in universities, I think they have it in the Caribbean by now, but I know that they have it in the United States. They have programs that they have invested in.
Yes, we have
so
them. We have them, yes.
When students submit papers, they are actually able to take those papers and run them through whatever it is to see whether it is their original work or it is the work of some other person. And if it is, they are disqualified because it speaks to their honesty.
Yeah, it's a program called Tinnitin. We all had to utilize that when we were at university. And Sean, the issue with it, people might say, oh, it's a master's program. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. This gentleman was, and again, not an attack on his competency, he was debarred.
The thing is, what is a master's supposed to represent? The fact that you physically sat down and wrote something out or typed something out, or the fact that you thought of a well-structured argument, a well-structured position, you gave a new perspective, and you're allowed to build upon the works of others. That is how we develop. Right? We're not going to literally try to reinvent the wheel every time someone looks to design a brand new car. You will build off of the work of others. That's fine. But I think what is key here is what he does not say. What he does not say is, I got this heavy-handed punishment, which both of you all have basically outlined. Did I protest? Did I kick up a fuss? Now that it's being thrown at me, am I offering, any sort of pushback as to the fact that this punishment was undeserved? No, he's not. What he's trying to say is, well, this minor thing happened and I got this punishment, but it was really minor and I just decided not to pursue it further. That's a little convenient. Usually that's not how the world works. Usually most politicians are not that calm and will not take things lying down so easily. And I think ultimately his explanation, and again it comes back to me to messaging. The messaging is bad, and perception is reality. When you have the Minister of Youth Development having accusations of plagiarism, which he has confirmed for all intents and purposes.
It's not an accusation. It's no longer an accusation.
It's not an accusation. Yeah. Basically, he has confirmed it to be true that he had issues against him about plagiarism. This is the Minister of Youth Development. One of the things that I remember very much, because I've been to both Roytec and COSTAT, and COSTAT especially. Roytec, of course, was before, so I don't know what it's like now. And I don't know if it's because of GATE, because part of my time in Roytec was actually before GATE and Dollar for Dollar. COSTAT especially took great pains to equip students to prevent this from happening, to telling them why this is bad, why they can't do it, and to warn them, do not do this. If you get caught, you are academically dead in the water.
The thing is, with the Turnitin program that's utilized, I'm not so sure if Foster Cummings was privileged enough to have that at his disposal at the time he was a student. But with Turnitin, you actually send that through the program and it gives you a breakdown of where you would have gone wrong in terms of your bibliography and in terms of your references, and where it actually gives you a percentage. And I believe the university allowed, I think, 15%, if I'm not mistaken, when I was there. And you were actually allowed to go and make changes. You could have used Turnitin many times as you wanted, and it's an expensive program that the university invested in because it's subscription-based, and every student has access to that. And after you send that through and you realize, hold on, I am 17% overboard, you get to make changes before submitting it. So this is quite laziness on the part. You know, that's one aspect of it. But at the end of it all, ladies and gentlemen, an example under the People's Partnership government, Suresh Ramachan, when he was in office, it came to light that he got his PhD. He was Dr. Suresh Ramachan. He got his PhD from a university in Hawaii, which eventually collapsed, and it became referred to as a failed university. He no longer carries the title Dr. Suresh Ramachan because of that. But around the world, we see politicians having to resign for instances like this. In Trinidad and Tobago, why is it different?
In some cases, business executives as well.
Exactly. Why is it different? Why, in order to get a promotion to be an executive in a business, you have to have these qualifications, such as master's, continuous education. Why do we get away with it in Trinidad?
And you know why it is? Even more challenging. Because when you do a master's or a PhD, anything post your first degree, you are representing that work, that thesis, as your original work. Now, no original work, as Sean says, you build on work that others have done. And in fact, it gives gravitas. It gives weight to your hypothesis, because you are able to rely and also quote others who are highly regarded, who have had similar views. But you have to put forward your own intellectual property, your thoughts, your hypothesis, else you are not doing a master's. And what I am saying is, the university has said nothing on the matter. We are only hearing Mr. Cummins' version of it. I suspect if the university were to reveal exactly how serious the matter is, it would make Mr. Foster blush if he could blush. It will make him blush. Because you don't do something like that easily. It is not an easy, because there's also a reflection on the university.
Well, Karen, we're going to have to pause on that for now, because we have a guest waiting with us for a little time. So we're going to take a very quick break here on the program. We're going to welcome our guest via Zoom this morning, and we're going to welcome him to the floor to continue the discussion. So stay tuned to Talking Point.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays, 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
In this season, we talk more about health, wellness, and everything in between. I am so excited to share with you everything about health and wellness so that you can design the life that you've always dreamed of. Join me here on What's Up Doc.
What's Up Doc, Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN Content Capital.
The Mary Immaculate Prayer Group and Friends presents its prayer breakfast on August 31st in aid of Monsignor Christian Pereira. The prayer breakfast begins from 9 a.m. at the Cathedral of Immaculate Conception. Cost is only $200. Come support the Cup of Gratitude in aid of Monsignor Pereira, August 31st.
Tickets are available at the parish office of the Cathedral of Immaculate Conception and the parish of Our Lady of Perpetual Help.
It may seem like the hardest thing to do right now, but we all need each other to wear a mask, wash our hands, watch our physical distance, and stay at home. We need you safe. Together we can make the difference. Together we can curb the spread of COVID-19. So let's be responsible in our actions. The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Yesterday morning here on Talking Point, Sean Michael Small, myself and Camille Pascal were discussing Attorney General Reginald Moore and the statement that he made in the public domain. But very early yesterday morning, I'm talking about in the wee hours, I received a bit of a script from a member of parliament for Shogunas, I think Shogunas West, and opposition member of parliament, Dinesh Rambali, outlining certain points in relation to where the Attorney General would have been misguided. So to explain to us and elaborate a bit more with us this morning on those points, we have with us via Zoom Mr. Dinesh Rambali. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the program and thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you so very much. I know we are having a little bit of technical difficulty this morning. I hope you are hearing me properly.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Well, we are in studio, yes.
We're here. We apologize for the time, sir. We only have about 40 minutes. So we're going to give you and Karen the floor to discuss. If we have questions, we'll interject. But it has been described as embarrassing and chaotic, the Attorney General's statement. And I know that you listed many points. You referred to many points, at least in the script that I saw. Could you elaborate a bit further so that the public will have a better understanding?
Thank you. Good morning again. Good morning to my good friend, Ms. Karen Nunes Teixeira. Good morning to viewers and listeners of this esteemed program. Let me say from the outset that I know Ms. Nunes Teixeira. She has written some excellent texts on ethics in the legal profession. I know there's one or two on probate practice and those sort of stuff. So I don't know why you all have invited me when you have Ms. Nunes Teixeira on program. She can talk from a point of view of actually training lawyers or teaching lawyers the ethics that is expected in the legal profession. I say that on the lighter side, but by no means I mean it with the greatest of respect. I want to say that let us just start with one aspect of what is taking place with the Honorable Attorney General. What has happened, and I know time is limited, I just want to make this one point, and hopefully from here we can get the discussion going. The Attorney General, in his capacity, representative capacity on behalf of the Republic of the State of Trinidad and Tobago, swore evidence in a district court, in a circuit court in Miami. I believe it's the Miami 11th Circuit Court. And in those proceedings, he basically put forward on behalf of himself and by extension the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago evidence which has now turned out to be untrue. Now, what is the implication of it is something we will get into. But I want to tell you that the Attorney General seems to be bobbing and weaving, that there are a lot of excuses, none directly related to him. They are all circumstantial excuses that crop up and arise. Maybe it was the Zoom link or the cable connections between Europe and Trinidad or Europe and the U.S. It was geographical distance. It was a matter of time. It was the fact that he had a personal trip in Europe. He was committed to that trip. And all of this is taking place within 1 month, less than a month of being appointed as the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago. When you are expected to swear an affidavit in court proceedings, number one, the affidavit itself holds a particular, let me say, importance in legal proceedings.
Mm-hmm.
So just as you would go, Ms. Nunes Teixeira will tell you it is viva voce evidence, so just as you would go in a court of law and you will utter words orally and you would say what your evidence is on oath, having held up the Bhagavad Gita, having held up the Quran or the Bible, as the case may be, that is what you are doing, but you are doing it in the form of an affidavit. This is what is expected in these kinds of proceedings, these kinds of applications. This was an application brought by his former client, in proceedings where they were seeking to disqualify him as representing the state of Trinidad and Tobago. So he knew what was at stake. He knew it was an application to disqualify him. And this is where you are giving, instead of giving that sworn viva voce oral testimony in a court of law where you are going to be cross-examined, you are going to have a mini trial on paper. And the evidence is something called affidavit. That is all that it is. So the importance is not to be belittled by any stretch of the imagination. Ms. Nunes Teixeira will also tell you, affidavit is sworn evidence. It is evidence provided, we say provided on oath, or as the case may be, you might have an affirmation. In the U.S. court, I don't know, Ms. Nunes Teixeira, if they actually utilize the equivalent of a commission of affidavit. So locally in Trinidad and Tobago, you will have to go before commission of affidavit where that oath is basically rendered. And if you have what you call exhibits, documentary evidence which you wish to attach to your affidavit or refer to, they then mark that in front of you. So this is where you are basically swearing that this is the document that I refer to when I am saying that the evidence is codified in a document dated 16th of March 2022, as the case may be. So it is there may not be the equivalent, but what there is on the affidavits in these U.S. proceedings is where you are still required to state your name and you declare your evidence. And at the end of the evidence in Trinidad, we call it a jurat. A jurat is a specific type of wording where you give weight to this evidence, right? So in written form now, instead of you holding up your hand and holding the book and saying, I swear by the Bible that this is my evidence, it is a written form of wording. We call it the jurat. And I'm taking the time to go through this because I know Ms. Nunes Teixeira would have taught the students all of these things. I am just taking the luxury of talking about it. It is so important that there are different forms of jurat. So if you are blind, there is a jurat for a blind person. If you are deaf, there is a jurat that is specifically worded for a deaf person. If it is you are speaking in a foreign language, but it is being something that is codified through an interpreter, there is a specific jurat for that. Mr. Armour would have said, affidavit says nothing further at the end of his particular evidence. And then it says under penalties of perjury pursuant to, and there's a specific U.S. codification. They have laws, federal laws, district laws, you name it, they have laws. So they will state that to the particular circuit court, what is stated there. I declare that I have read the foregoing affidavit and that the facts stated herein are true and correct. This is something that you cannot peddle with, you cannot dabble with it very lightly. The affidavit is formatted in a particular way. I spoke about the jurat, and I spoke about what he was expected to put forward. If you are going before court of law, remember this is not you, Ketan Shah, it is not me, it is not Ms. Nunes Teixeira. It is the Attorney General, Senior Counsel Reginald Armour, representing the state of Trinidad and Tobago. He has a greater duty cast upon him to make full and frank disclosure in whatever he says in that affidavit, and he has a duty to ensure that he's being truthful. And so this is what is at stake. What is at stake, and I managed to capture part of your the prelude to this segment where you were talking about how lightly certain matters are being treated with by office holders, high office holders. And you know, I think you were maybe talking about an academic, what is considered to be an academic crime. But in this particular case, you are talking about a high office holder, the second highest office holder in the cabinet, the person who is under our supreme law, the Constitution, the one who advises the cabinet, yes, but more importantly, the person who looks after the welfare, the rights and interests of us, the citizenry. So what is at stake is that you have Mr. Armour, who has come out with statements. In the first instance, he put out a statement and he hoped it would go away by saying, well, you know, it is because the matter is sub judice, meaning they have filed an appeal. And now you see about a week and a half later, maybe less than a week and a half, but some days later, he has come full circle now and he's saying, no, I think that the concerns that everybody is raising, the concerns that are being raised throughout the country and wherever else, they are all legitimate. And therefore, I must say something at this point in time. And now what he does is he confirms, whereas we were speculating to some extent before, he confirms that he put evidence about that? Do we say, okay, Mr. Amor, we are minded to give you the benefit of the doubt that there was no ulterior motive when you failed to give truthful evidence in that affidavit, or you gave a half-hearted evidence in that affidavit, but we understand that there was no bad motive behind it, and therefore we must give you a blight. Let us see what happens at the end of the appeal. That really speaks to a reckless and an unconcerning sort of approach to what is expected of high office holders. So I just stop there because I know you all will probably want to add some things and maybe discussion gets going.
Well, my thing is, Sue, with everything that you've just explained, and thank you very much for taking the time to explain that. I know that whilst we should not be a jury, we are in a position to now judge at the fact that Mr. Amor has made a statement. So understand what I'm stating there. By no means are we a court of law where we can be a jury and say this is, but we are in a position now that because all of this information has come out and the Attorney General has made comments, that we can judge it and assess based over that. And simply enough, with all the information that we have, I no longer think it's premature to suggest that the Attorney General has lied. And I do not think it's premature. Yeah, I know. Legal language, legally, you have to be very careful. I completely understand that. However, in lying, I wouldn't go as far as to say, because I don't know the laws that well. I can't say he has committed an act of crime. Let me just leave it there.
I want to add something to what was said, and it's important that it supports what has been said, and thank you for all those good thoughts that you have of my ability. I don't know if I own it, but in any event, the first thing I wanted to say is that I think you would have had to have it notarized, because under the Evidence Act, once you're using a document outside of the jurisdiction, it requires a notary public to notarize it and not just a commissioner. So that's just one point I would make. Everything else that you said is what I've been saying about the importance of an affidavit. It's like if you start on any witness box and swear on your Gita or your Quran or your Bible. So everything, absolutely agree with you. But you know what troubles me? What troubles me is this, is that on April the 13th, Mr. Quaitam made the application for Mr. Amor to be disqualified on the basis of conflict. So before the April the 13th, and when that application was made to the court, what did Mr. Amor have to say on the matter? Did Mr. Amor ever approach the court and say that he was in a position of a conflict and therefore could not represent? Would he have stayed silent if this application had not been made? I do not have the date on which he made his affidavit, but I do have the date on which the order was made, and the order was made on May the 2nd, disqualifying him. So what we do know is that, and what is even more troubling, so we have the April the 13th, we have the, when the application for disqualification was made, May the 2nd, when the order was made disqualifying him and his law firm that had acted with him. But you have now that we are only apprised of this on June the 5th. And why? Because the Express asked the question from him as to whether, in fact, he had been disqualified and his firm had been disqualified. So it makes you wonder to what extent he would have come out and given full disclosure to the people of Trinidad and Tobago had not these events unfolded as they did.
Karen, we're almost out of time. I have a very quick question, and we don't have time to go into it, but I just thought, will his presence in the Attorney General's office with the conflict of interest, the effect on the trial, could the court matter, could it basically undermine the entire government's position because they are privy to someone who used to be part of the other side?
Yes, I'm sure we can answer. Prince Balkin, which is KPMG, which is the case classifier, and what they're saying is building a Chinese wall. They put the person involved in the matter, in which they had already acted for Prince Balkin's family, but in an unrelated matter. They put them in a separate building. They did all the Chinese wall things that you could possibly do to insulate the team. but the court did not accept it. And at this stage, I find it very difficult for them to be able to do that, given that his recusal and his mea culpa came only after an application had been made for him to be disqualified.
Well, Karen, I'm so...
He has to have access to the document.
Karen, I'm sorry I have to cut you in the middle of your answer, but folks, we have to break for news on the hour. We are 1 minute over time. We go to news now, and when we return, we'll continue the conversation this morning.
Seven is out, all day is in. WESN News on the hour.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
Burning questions, urgent topics. Welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11 a.m. only on WESN Content Capital.
The Mary Immaculate Prayer Group and Friends presents its prayer breakfast on August 31st in aid of Monsignor Christian Pereira. The prayer breakfast begins from 9 a.m. at the Cathedral of Immaculate Conception. Cost is only $200. Come support the Cup of Gratitude in aid of Monsignor Pereira, August 31st.
Tickets are available at the parish office of the Cathedral of Immaculate Conception and the parish of Our Lady of Perpetual Help. People of Blanchisseuse and environs, something big is coming your way. Be part of the initial membership drive for the establishment of the North Coast Credit Union Cooperative Society Limited this Sunday, 26th June at 2 p.m. sharp at the Blanchisseuse Community Center. Walk with $100 and your ID card. For more information, call 783-1971.
Welcome back to the program. This morning we're changing things up a little bit. We've decided not to open up the phone lines this morning. We do apologize for that, but we find it very necessary to continue the conversation. And MP Rambali has agreed, and we're grateful, to stay with us until 9:30 a.m.
So I want to pick up where we left off because I asked if this could potentially undermine the state's case, and Karen, you were giving the explanation, and I guess we could go a step further could it go to the extent where this matter might potentially be quashed? It might not be able to proceed because the compromising position that the AG's prior knowledge might put the state's legal team in?
Well, I mean, I would think that he's not going to be able to act, and neither would anybody who was part of his team in the Attorney General's department not be able to participate. But, justice must always be done. And I think the overriding consideration is that should the persons who are accused be allowed to escape, if they are guilty at all, the punishment, as it were, as others have been, if they should. And I think it will be an uphill battle to be able to satisfy a court that they could insulate and provide that Chinese wall so that no leakage will impact on the continuation matter. Because finally, just to say this, unfortunately or fortunately, because of our Constitution, Section 79(2), it clearly says that matters of a civil nature must be either brought by or defended by the Attorney General. And that is, that makes it a little more difficult to replace the Attorney General. I don't know what India has to say on that, Mr. Rambali.
Mr. Rambali, bringing you back into the conversation, that was what we're going to lead into next, because the other aspect of it is now his ability to continue as Attorney General, because the office of the Attorney General and him being in that position has now also affected the Law Association, where attorneys have indicated that even though he has made a statement, they're going ahead with their move of a no confidence motion. What does this mean for AG Amor? In fact, I'm wondering if this even stimulated him to make the comments, to come out to make the comments. And I don't know if you could clarify whether or not he may lose his ability to practice law in Trinidad and Tobago.
Two things I want to say. I'm glad that the last question, Ms. Nunes Teixeira, answered that one in terms of what can be the possible or potential impact upon proceedings moving forward. Because I have some views, and if I express those views, the first thing people will want to say is that Rambali is somehow fighting for Mr. Kwaitong and others. So I am glad that if I could just steer clear of that one for now.
Okay.
And deal with your second question, which is the fact that the Law Association, now we must distinguish that the Law Association, we are talking about members of the legal fraternity, and then there's the executive, the council of the Law Association.
Mm-hmm.
The council of the Law Association, I continue to hold a view that I am concerned over their silence in the first instance. And then when they did have a meeting, I believe it was last week, Tuesday, it appeared to me, I'm not attacking the executive council of the Law Association, but it appears to me that they are being very lethargic in something as important as this issue. I thought that they would have done more. I thought, just like the rest of the public who are prepared and they are diligent citizens, that they will look at what is in the public domain and they can form preliminary views, as we have done, that the Law Association, the executive of the Law Association, would have been prepared to do that. It was quite clear that when they met last week, and they issued a statement subsequent to their council meeting that they were not prepared to say anything, even if it may have been a preliminary position. They did not. In fact, what they said is that they're going to try to assimilate the documentary matters that pertain to the particular court action, and then, look at the various statements, and then they will offer statements. With the greatest respect to the Executive Council of the Law Association, that is really, something that I thought that they are failing in their duty. Let me put it at that. I am a member, just like Ms. Nunes Teixeira, I am a member of the legal profession, and as a member, not as MD Fishing One as well, I'm speaking as an attorney at law, practicing as a member of the bar. I am disappointed in their inaction in this whole matter. And as I say, there's a frightening lethargy on their part. So that is the law association. As for the members who have now piloted a motion, essentially it is something akin to a motion of no confidence, because the resolution which they are seeking to pass is one which will express a very strong view on having no confidence in the Attorney General. And therefore that motion, they are of the view that they will continue with it. I am not speaking to them, as we say in law terms, I'm not holding briefs for them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I don't see, as a member of the profession, I don't see that based on Mr. Amo's recent statement, if I may say the Monday statement, that there is anything that he really has answered. What he has done is he has proffered us, he has strung together some excuses, but he has not really answered whether or not his continued occupation as Attorney General is eroding the integrity into the administration of justice. He has not said whether or not he's of the view that the collective notion of what justice demands in our society, our democracy, he is somehow, standing as an affront to those principles. He has not said whether or not he agrees with what Ms. Nunes Teixeira, well, I don't know if she said this, but I am, of course, making it lighter by heckling Ms. Nunes Teixeira on this. But what lawyers are saying is a breach of the rule of law. So he has not really offered some response of substance which the members of the law association, the members of our society can go away and say, listen, I have heard what the Attorney General has to say. I don't necessarily agree with his whole rule, the diligence and the aptitude with which he ought to have applied in the court proceedings. He failed in that duty, but I think that it is something that we should await the outcome of the appeal. People are not being put in that position where they are armed enough that they can make such a decision. So as it stands, the citizenry and members of the profession will continue to hold the view that A.G. Amo, all he has done by way of the statement is offered excuses. In those excuses, what he has done is he has actually confirmed, I return to the point which we started off with, he has confirmed that the blunders were in fact made on his part. And that in fact when he said that he was just simply a junior attorney, a note taker, a junior to Mr. Alan Alexander, senior counsel, and that his role was minimalistic, he has confirmed that all of that is untrue. So I don't know that when he says conveniently that he expected that the court would have allowed him an opportunity to offer clarification, his clarification would have been the equivalent of saying, listen, what I said on oath before you, court, Mr. Court or Miss whoever the judge is, I did not speak the truth. That is the equivalent of what his clarification would have been. The clarification was not going to be anything else. And then it would have fallen upon the lawyers, Sequel Law and whosoever else, Mr. Quaitong's lawyers and whoever else is present in those proceedings, to take the position and address the court on matters of law. And the matters of law they would address is whether or not there was in fact this conflict of interest which exists, and therefore whether or not Mr. Amo can be disqualified. But it still does not change his evidence. His evidence is now compounding his rule, and he is now agreeing with what Mr. Quaitong. So what his clarification would have done would have given weight, evidential weight, to to the evidence Mr. Python put before the court in support of his motion to disqualify AG Amor.
Well, Mr. Rambali,
we must not lose sight of those things.
Mr. Rambali, so I get what you're saying, and I agree with you. A reversal, it's hard to think of a reversal as clarification. You are not just clarifying your position, you are literally taking a 180 and going in the opposite direction. I have to ask, I'm not entirely sure where the discussion is in the narrative of this whole situation, but how likely, because I get that it's based on intention, right? And intention might be hard to prove. But how likely do you think that the AG might be charged for perjury or something similar in this case, given the fact that the explanation of his motives do seem a bit thin, do seem very implausible?
So for my part, I would want to answer this very, brief. I think it is not really where the discussion should go as to whether or not perjury charges will be brought. That is a matter for U.S. authorities, and whether the judge in the proceedings may make a finding or make a subsequent order saying that has to be investigated and stuff. What is at stake? And that is my response. I really don't want to go in the direction of whether or not perjury charges are imminent or whether it will be pursued. What is relevant for our discussion is you have an office holder. In terms of the legal profession, he's referred to as the titular head of the bar. That is not a namesake. That is what you represent to the legal profession. I continue to tell people in this country that whether you like lawyers or you don't like lawyers, well, we say attorneys at law, they are really the dividing line between anarchy and the democracy. And you really depend on the attorneys at law to guide you in terms of issues of rule of law, constitutional rights, and whether your rights are being infringed, and to marshal those arguments before a court of law. I am saying that this is what you represent to the legal profession, and for the country, your office is a standard setting, a standard bearing office, and you have to lead by example. What you have in fact done is you have rendered this country's collective notion of what justice demands procedurally and substantially in a court of law. You have rendered those things in shambles. And what faith would people have in your office moving forward when it comes to representing the citizens of this country in proceedings, whether locally or abroad? Remember, at the end of the day, it is our rights that he is protecting and defending. In that Miami court, people may be a little bit distant in their understanding that what that case involves, yes, it is criminal proceedings against litigants in the U.S. court, but the AG is representing our rights in that proceedings. We have rights to ensure that those proceedings proceed in a fair manner and proceed in such a way that if corrupt practices have in fact taken place and occurred, that those who are culpable are brought to justice for the benefit of us here. So this is what he represents to us.
Can I interject before we run out of time? I think it's important to make this, just to sum up, on at least my point. I think it goes into a loss of confidence, because if we have a case where the Attorney General has been seen not to be telling the truth, then when are we going to believe whatever he says? And as we know, and as we said it before, but I'm just reinforcing it, the Attorney General is a peculiar creature of statute in that he not only acts on behalf of the government, but he also represents the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So there's a bit of tension there. But what I found most disturbing about this whole issue, and Mr. Amor is a friend of mine, I like him very much. I think he is a wonderful human being, and I think he's a great lawyer. But we have to be fair as attorneys at law. And one of the things you have in the code of ethics is that your duty to the public administration of justice. And what I found very noteworthy is this. When the Attorney General came forward and said that he had acted before and gave a 2003 date which was not correct and state was taken, he only gave that information in response to an application for him to be disqualified. He never gave that information voluntarily. It was in response to that. Secondly, when he came and gave the information, first statement on June the 5th, when he made that statement on June the 5th, again, this is about 3 months down the line, he did not come to the media, he did not come to the public and tell them what was going on. It was because the Express newspaper asked him questions and forced him, in my view, to answer. Thirdly, which follows of what Mr. Rambali was saying, the law association made up of the councils, they can call a meeting, or if they will not call a meeting because whatever reason, you can have a special meeting once 40 members call for it. And it is noteworthy that once the 40 members will arrive at, so a special meeting could be held, we got a second statement from the Attorney General. So it seems to me that the Attorney General only speaks, in my view, when he feels he's forced to answer, whether it's an affidavit, whether it's the Express revealing what was going on, or whether it is a special meeting that has been convened. And that speaks, it does not speak well of him in terms of building trust and confidence and transparency in him as an office holder. And that is my view. And I ended by saying he is a friend of mine. I have a high regard for him otherwise, and I think he's a good attorney at law.
If I can just point out, one thing, forgive me, but ladies and gentlemen, you see how when it comes to attorneys at law, the jargon is extremely important. Because early on, I made the comment of the AG, well, he's lied. And I stood back for a moment, and I realized, you see how Karen and Mr. Rambali phrased it. It said, possibly not telling the truth versus my stance. So in these conversations, this is why it's always good to have legal minds, because the jargon is important and we don't fully understand the law. The issue now is, Sean, is what is going to happen next. We haven't heard from the Prime Minister. I believe he is I know he was due for medical test in Los Angeles, and then he was supposed to go to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Rwanda. But we are yet to hear from him on this issue. He's remained silent. The acting Prime Minister has also, Colin Mbiti, he has also remained very silent on this, but not answering questions directly.
This is par for the course of the government, and like I said, we saw that even from the President with regards to the Police Service Commission. Answers were not easily forthcoming, and the explanation was not necessarily very acceptable or plausible from the point of view of those of us on the outside looking in. So now we see a repeat where someone who should be well respected as a legal mind and a well respected person in society comes as a part of the government that has more than just political, the position that they're in has certain technical requirements of with regards to ethics and responsibility. And you would hope that the person would be leading with their legal background and not starting off by making political mistakes. And especially with the Office of the Attorney General, where I believe we already had situations where the office was not necessarily, we didn't have a great example of the legal profession with regards to the regulations that were wrote and how the government expressed them and enforced them and presented them even. So now that we have this with the new Attorney General being caught up in this controversy, and I did want to ask both of our esteemed lawyers, and they more or less answered it before I could get to the question, what is the fallout? And I think the loss of confidence, both the population to the office of the AG and in the rule of law, as well as to the legal profession, to what is supposed to be head of the legal profession. And those things, as Mr. Rambali said, lawyers are they are the defenders of democracy. If there is some injustice, that's more or less who we have to rely on, right, in order to ensure that the injustice, yes, the press could highlight things, but at the end of the day, certain things will probably end up to have to be challenged in the court, and you need the legal profession to not be caught up in any sort of controversy. Because if the public already has issues trusting just the politicians in general and various institutions, the last thing now that we need is to say, well, the whole legal profession is a joke. right?
don't-
It's kind of similar. We have, as we said, the Minister of Youth Development has plagiarism over his head. Now the AG, with regards to his ethics, has this question over his head. It erodes a society.
I don't think that people will go as far as to say, but I hear where you're coming from, that the legal profession is a joke and lawyers are a joke. I mean, people make,
It will eventually
cracks
could get
all the
there.
time.
It eventually can get there.
And that is why certain things need to be put in place now. And the Office of the Attorney General is in dispute. The Attorney General is in dispute. He was out of the country for whatever reason. He said it was on official business. Maybe he went to Miami to sort out some stuff. Who knows? I go back to what I stated yesterday in his comments, very finally concluding. He stated that cases surrounding himself, in which he represented Mr. Quaitung, he has no records of that because those papers were disposed of. I cannot understand for the life of me how an attorney at law can make a statement like that. But this is the Attorney General we're speaking about, not just any ordinary attorney at law. This is the Attorney General, and for him to even suggest that, well,
not just that, somebody who is aspiring to public office now, you're going to divest yourself of important documents that might be important in the future.
Sean, just hope, just keep your fingers crossed that no papers go missing again.
Mr. Rambali?
Yes, I just want to say that it is not unknown that lawyers will, to use the words that you all are using, divest themselves of files. What happens is that if at all you actually put files in storage, or for storage space or whatever, in your role has come to an end. Once a certain amount of time, maybe a 6-year period, whatever it is, you deem that to be a safe period. You say, okay, I'm getting rid of it. That is not what is at stake here. If, as Ms. Nunes Teixeira has pointed out, that you are alerted that persons whom you are representing the state of Trinidad and Tobago against indicate that you were somehow part and parcel of their defense, and therefore there is a conflict. If AG Amor, if he had divested himself of files, he owed himself a duty to be diligent enough to cause the massive resources that he has access to in his office to order a transcript of those proceedings that existed before the magistracy. If you go to Ms. Nunes Teixeira and you say, Ms. Nunes Teixeira, I want you to follow up a malicious prosecution case on my behalf. I was charged before, and I was subsequently let off. And I think then police officers just was acting out of pure wickedness. First thing she would say, well, okay, tell me, when did this happen? You know what? It happened just about 3 years and 8 months ago. And she would say, well, okay, you have any papers, anything? No, I don't. Well, okay, and that is the next thing she will do. She will say, we have no choice. You need to run down to the magistrate's court. You need to talk to the clerk of the peace, and you need to tell them, I want a transcript of this thing now. Don't leave there until you get that document. And that is where you'll get that transcript, and the transcript will now tell you what it is you were, according to you, you could not remember. So it doesn't matter.
Mr. Rambali, forgive me for being facetious. This is Trinidad courts we're talking about, huh?
That don't matter. That don't matter. Something important as this.
You said something that I have to correct with you before we go off the show. With regard to the public health regulations, the Privy Council did rule that they are constitutional, and all the rules that the Minister of Health made in relation to public health regulations, I think the day before yesterday, the Privy Council has ruled them to be constitutional.
Well, that's what I meant, but I understand where you're coming from. So yes, that is correct.
Anyway, MP Rambali, I'm so sorry, sir. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank you for staying with us up until the end of the program. But it is 9:30 a.m. And join us again soon for another discussion. There's a lot taking place in Trinidad, and we need minds to continue the discussion. Karen Nunes Teixeira, thank you very much. Karen, on this program, sometimes it's a walk down memory lane because I find very often you're joined by some of your former students.
and actually got the word esteemed for a long time. I've not heard that word, but it's okay, Sean. It's okay, Keaton. No problem.
Karen, always a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you very much.
And just a quick update, folks. Listen, I want to remind people at the end of the day, yes, life is moving on as bitterly as it might seem, given the general state of things with this next round of inflation. But COVID is still there. I know people want to free up and get back to the normal swing of things and to go to fetes and parties and lime. Just please be careful, especially have any loved ones at home that might be vulnerable.
And this is one instance where we can't necessarily blame the government. Personal responsibility is a major part of this, as we mentioned yesterday, and I cannot stress that enough. Folks, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Sean Michael Small and myself, Keaton Shaw. Thank you to Ms. Karen Shara, Mr. Rambali. But we'll see you again tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.